You say that a long-term strategy for ethics is crucial to have in organizations, but can you explain a bit more about how you manage this when the technology landscape and realities keep changing so fast around you? This technology has a really high pace of innovation today. So could you elaborate a bit on this?
Yeah, well, I think that as ethics can be seen soon enough, like a lot of other processes were seen in the organizations. Some years ago, you didn't discuss, for example, quality management or communication in the same way as you do now. Now you have dedicated teams and workflows and processes for some of these areas. So I do think that if we consider ethics in the same way, then for sure we will be able to implement it in place and to have different ways and workflows of doing it. The question is more that to do this, you need to have the organizations interested in it.
I think the great benefit of science fiction in this as a tool, as a thought space, is that you can establish any rules that you want and let it play out. And it doesn't suffer from present fiction or past fiction in having to fit within a something where you just keep saying to yourself, no, that would never happen, or it's not real, or whatever it is. Once we put it into the science fiction space, then of course it can be real. So we're now free to explore what the implications and consequences of that are. And many authors, as Clare has pointed out, do that extremely well.
I think it provides a big safety net to be able to address some things that perhaps we wouldn't be addressing if we thought of real places and people. So this is for sure, I think, something that could be included in the daily management of ethical issues, because it makes you get out of your context and yourself and think about things in a different perspective. And this question of empathy and considering things from different angles than your own is possibly the cornerstone of ethics. Once you have empathy and you can think about things in this way, for sure you will consider ethical and societal challenges in a different way. So yeah, absolutely yes to everything.
Whistleblowers are heavily debated these days, and some defend themselves on, some are against these whistleblower rules and policies. But do you, or does your work foresee a special, almost systemic role for whistleblowers in our organizational ethical ecosystem?
So I think whistleblowing is important, but clearly it is kind of a nuclear option. I mean, it would have been far better if Facebook had a process or a system for finding out all those. Well, it seems rather unfortunate they did know about it, but they weren't that bothered about it.
And typically whistleblowing is a last resort, is it not? You know, it is, you are at the end of the rope. Your career is now over as a result of that. And you imagine that makes people stop and think about whether or not this issue is so important and so on. So, I mean, what we really aspire to, I think, is something that's a little bit less extreme than that, where questions can be raised because people are happy to hear them and so on. And you know, I don't know if we'll ever get to that sort of a zone when ethics is often seen as something which inhibits or stops things happening and so on. But at least that's our aspiration, isn't it? That we can be open and easy about these questions and people don't think that they're stupid or that you're trying to impede, that you're trying to explore and see what makes possible.
Virtual reality is interactive environment, and what we do is that we collaborate around the 3D models of the product or digital twin. And of course, it's not possible to have everybody wearing VR headset. Not everybody has those. So we have been also examining hybrid setups where only some people use the VR, but then we stream the view from the VR to other users, either with the desktop app or with the Teams, for example.
So do you have any view on when the cost of this may become less prohibitive, so it will become more mainstream, these use of VR technologies in education and collaboration?
I would say that it's already now in the level that it can be applied in industry. And especially when thinking about really wisely who is using the VR and how and what are the roles, and then who can just follow the sessions. For example, in the training, not everybody needs to have the VR headset, but maybe the trainer is showing in the VR, and then some people are following. And same here with these scenarios, that not everybody needs to have the VR headset to get the benefits of the VR.
One of the things we find very important as well, how we can use technology to actually improve training. That's the one side. And the other side is that we have to build this kind of applications. And Sanni was already talking about we need all kinds of experts that have different expertise in a diverse group. And I think that those are two connections that we are working on at the moment in our project in ESSA. Because our aim is to support the growth and innovation capacity of the software sector. What we see is, of course, Sanni has a big project, all kinds of experts, but I saw some roles in there that people actually need to know how to make it. Of course, we have low code, but still, even in low code environments, you need people that can build it and can design it. So we are defining what kind of learning outcomes the people need to possess. Learning outcomes are not about what people are doing during a training or whatever, but what the outcome is of a certain learning process. And this learning process can be in an organization or can be in the training area. And that's what Sharm is talking about. For the training area, we define these learning outcomes, and then we start to make programs for that. And we have the piloting next year for some specific programs that will be piloted for upskilling and reskilling. But at the same time, we will develop materials that can be used by all training programs that you want.
I have a comment about the different skills. One thing that you didn't mention, but maybe you agree also, that sometimes in a bigger project, or when we are doing some complex, solving complex problems or doing some complex things, we don't know beforehand what kind of skills we actually need. And there it's especially handy that people have some extra skills that they can bring in to the project, and maybe something we didn't know that we actually benefit from.
Yeah, that's nowadays getting more and more important. We're also talking, we're now focusing on the pie-shaped professional that at least has one specialization and another specialization, for example, software. But you nowadays see more and more people that have a comb-like shape. And what is meant by that? They have worked in different areas. They worked in marketing. They worked in, I don't know, perhaps with the elevators. They have all this kind of backgrounds, like in different fields, logistics, and they combine it. And what you can see is that the cone-shaped professional will also be more important in the future, because as you state, sometimes you don't even know what kinds of skills you need at the beginning. And you should not be focused only on developing the minimal required skills, but you want to take people that are already working, for example, and state like, okay, very nice. You're now, for example, an accountant. A lot of your work as an accountant is being done in the future through AI. Your work is getting different. Get extra training, get extra knowledge, get extra skills in another field, for example, software, so you can be useful in other places. You will see that people have to train all their lives. Lifelong learning will be the norm in the coming years. Because you need people, as you say, with skills that you don't even know at the beginning of the project that you need.
Tamara, you spoke of the need for men to take on advocacy and sponsorship roles in the drive for greater diversity. Can you expand on this? And should this focus only be in our organizations, or should we look at early interventions and advocacy in the community, for example, with young women still at school? Thank you, Jared, for the question. Great question.
Thank you, Ronald. And I think Petra also touched on that. So maybe she also wants to share some insights. So I think both, obviously it is critical that, of men are involved. Why? Because this is not a woman's issue, right? And the reason for that is that more often than not, men are in those leadership positions, and therefore they're the ones that are able to make change happen, right? I mean, if your boss is a man, he will need to promote you. He'll need to guide you and mentor you and make sure that you reach that position. But also when we look into the community, absolutely, because again, it's how are you raising your voice? What is the message you're sending through media about a role women do and should play in decision making and leadership positions? That is universal, right? Again, not just when we talk about tech industry, but just overall. I mean, there is a reason why only 28 ICT ministers across the globe are women, for example. Right? So you need to bring everyone with you. I mean, the message needs to be clear. This is not a woman's issue. And unless everyone is on board, change cannot be progressive and it cannot be sustained. So that is, I think, a message that needs to be embedded in society. And it needs to come from all sectors, community, yes, but also media, because we need to look at how media is portraying the role of women. As I spoke about, company leadership, which again, unfortunately, on average, tends to be more men-dominated, more male-dominated, etc. So, to answer your question in short, it needs to be both.
Okay.
So, if I may add some points, for me, there are two main points here. Every change is everything. Start often at the top, and on the top level in our organizations. For now, it's the majority of men that are there. We do have a lot of statistics about the number of women on the top levels, and it's not very nice. So if we know that there is the level of the men on the top levels, we need to have the advocacy from them, because we need everyone going down to understand that, this is our cause, and we praise for it. So this is the first point about the leadership and the level of the organization. But the other point is also that speaking about diversity, it means that we are speaking about inclusion, and the men, we can't create the feeling that they are excluded from this. So it's why we need to have men inside of this discussion, because inclusion speak about men, women, everyone here in the tech fields, and we need to make men also understand that it's inclusion for everyone, and you will be not excluded from these discussions and from these strategies. And it's why we need to have men's voices there, because they can be the porte-parole, comme on dit en français, they can be the advocates of these changes, and that they can bring those points of view to others men. So for me, there are two of these points very, very important, starting with the top, going to down, and also inclusion, which will mean that it will be not excluded for men. So diversity charter, as Ulrich mentioned, was launched 2 years ago, and I would like to make you understand that this is a tool to check at what stage is your organization in the field of diversity, but also a guideline to build it, because a charter is the document leading you through different stage of the diversity procedures, and especially it's ready to build with you your strategy in the diversity. The goal for us is definitely to increase gender diversity in technical profession across Europe. And this is very important that we are not discussing about the one country, we are discussing about whole Europe. So it means that also the community of organizations participating in the charter yet can be a very strong support and a network for you in exchanging best practices and the knowledge we can have and we can gain together.
In GSMA, for example, we have something that's called One GSMA. It's an employee-led forum for diversity and inclusion, but it's sponsored by our chief financial officer and our chief regulatory officer. And why is this important? Because it already signals willingness and support from the top for these critical issues. And the beauty of it is that it's employee-led. So let the employees decide what needs to change, because very often when you sit at the top, you don't have visibility of what's happening at the bottom. But at the same time, make sure you're supporting them hand by hand, because then you're signaling that desire to change, because of course the change will come from them. You need to invest and develop in mentorship and training programs. again, Petra mentioned the budgetary implications for that, and she's absolutely right. Unless you invest, you can expect that much will change, because again, it's about changing the company culture, right? So as you think of developing these programs, again, think about how are you shaping them. Are you developing role model programs focusing on connecting women with up and coming talents? Are you investing in different leadership style trainings? And how are you also, let's say, spreading the message, right, across the company? And are you creating an environment of open sharing, and also are you sending the message that these opportunities are open for everyone that may wish to come forward?